Hello, everybody. Good evening. I'm Pat Edwards, Chair of Planning Committee. Can we first of all move to, for me to just read the normal procedure in the beginning of the meeting. There's no fire alarm planned for this evening. Should the alarm sound, please leave via the nearest available emergency exit. Two of the closest exits are through the glass door behind you to my left and through the double doors onto the riverside behind you. Please muster at Café des Amis. Members of the public are welcome to make their own recordings of the meeting using whatever non-disruptive methods they think are suitable. I would like to remind everyone present at this meeting that it's being minuted, recorded, filmed and made available to view in live and archive form via the Council's website. If you're seated in the public gallery, it's possible the cameras may capture your image. If you wish to avoid being filmed, it's recommended you make a member of staff aware who can direct you to where you sit. The Westgate Gardens on the riverside are locked, so members of the public must leave the Guildhall by the side exit behind the glass door. Could I check about apologies, Lauren, please?
We've got apologies from Councillor Ian Stockley, Councillor Castle and Councillor Old, Chair.
Thank Councillor Prentice. Is that, sorry, you haven't got the mic on.
I apologise, Chair. Councillor Mackenzie has also sent his apologies.
Thank you very much. We wondered what was happening. Thank you. Lauren, do we have any substitutes?
We've got no substitutes tonight, Chair.
Thank you very much. Are there any declarations of interest by councillors or officers? I'll ask Lauren to read the general declaration first, and then if you could indicate if you have any others. Thank you.
All or some councillors may have received correspondence from or spoken with applicants, agents, supporters or objectors, and some of the public speakers may also be known to members of the committee due to their work as councillors. Neither circumstance prevents councillors from participating in the meeting. However, any councillor who considers that they do not have an open mind in respect of any item on the agenda should not participate in the meeting when the relevant item is to be discussed.
I'm doing it now. Do we have any other declarations of interest? Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, on item 6, I will leave the chamber for discussion. Item 6. Thank you.
Okay, fine. Thank you very much. Any other interests? In terms of public speakers tonight, we have 5 public speakers tonight who will be heard immediately after the officer's presentation for each relevant item. Minutes of the meeting on the 7th of January 2025. Could we confirm as a true record by general assent, please? Thank you, everybody. That's confirmed, Lauren, by general assent. We'll move on to the first main application, application number CA 24 01846 233 Canterbury Road, Herne. Could I ask the planning officer, Ashley Kynes, to introduce the report? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. There we go. So this application relates to 233 Canterbury Road in Herne. The application is for a single-storey rear extension, porch to front, together with increased roof height, with rear dormer and external material changes. And the application is brought to the committee at the request of Councillor Howes-and-Jones, given the impact to the street scene. So for context, this is the site here, with the boundary of the Herne Conservation Area just to the west. These are the existing elevations. You can see the front, rear and the 2 sides. So this is the proposal with the increase in ridge height of approximately 0.4 metres, the rear dormer, and then you can see the increase to the side garage roof just to the side. For context, earlier last year, there was a previous approval for a similar scheme for a single-storey rear extension with a rear dormer and a front porch. The reason for this application is to increase the ridge height to allow for just more headroom, and the side roof of the garage is being increased just to improve the junction with the rear extension. So for additional context, this is the photos of the front elevation, the rear. You can see the two neighbours on either side there. And then this is the street looking north. So you can see the single story just gradually increases there to the 2-story just at the end. And finally, the existing street scene you can see at the top with the application site in the middle. And then at the bottom, the application site is in the middle again, and this is the proposed. So you can see the relatively small increase in the ridge height there. So given that, given the assessment in the officer report, the application is recommended for approval, subject to safeguarding conditions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have one speaker. Could I ask Holly Foyle, the applicant, to come forward, please? You have 3 minutes.
Hi. I just want to address some of the comments we've had made on our application. I understand our neighbours have a lot of worries as the work that we have started to do is quite extensive, but we are doing it properly. We have building regulations by way of Harwood's. We have architects, we have structural engineers on board who are checking our progress all along the way. The bungalows along there are not all exactly the same height. I think what we are proposing to do will bring us in line with the neighbour to the left, I think. So we'll actually be matching with them. We won't be obstructing anyone's views. And we are very conscious of minimalising the disruption throughout the works. We've put up the planning application letters. I've wrote to all my neighbours when I've had lorries turning up. We've been quite considerate of minimising the disruption. That's it, really. Do you want me to turn out?
Thank you very much. Thank you. Could we move then to consider this item? I think from the chair that I would be happy to support the application in the light of the comments in the report. I'm still an open mind until I hear what everybody's got to say. But in order that we have a proposal to discuss, I propose that we do grant subject to safeguarding conditions. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Mellish, thank you very much. So that's the item for debate. Please, do I have any comments from anybody? Dan Smith, Councillor Smith.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. Do we have a picture of, the speaker mentioned that I think it was 235, that the increased height would be matching that. Do we have a picture of the two properties together, so you can see how it would look with the neighbouring property?
Councillor Thomas.
Chair, while we're looking into that, can I just have clarification of what's already been passed? or was because this has come back again, or this? I'm just trying to work out what's changed on this application. Thank
Yes,
you, Chair.
it's the height of the roof, but I will ask the officer to explain that again. Thank you. Looking for this photo, if we've got natural street scene that Councillor Smith has. I think it's the trouble is, I think we need the officer to answer your question, and he's looking for the photo at the minute.
Shall I confirm the changes?
Oh yes.
Yes,
okay.
no, I can confirm the changes. So yes, in the 2024 application, the single-storey rear extension was approved along with a dormer window in the existing roof slope. What this is now proposing is the same rear extension, a similar size dormer window, but an increase in height of the roof of the existing dwelling by 0.47 metres, I believe. So it's an increase in the ridge height of the building, and the reason that the officer gave earlier is to increase the head height that's available within the roof conversion. So yeah, the difference between this, the approved scheme and this scheme in front of us is the increase in ridge height and the continuation of the rear extension, the roof of that over the existing garage. That's what the changes are proposed under this application.
Thank you, Chair.
So this is the application site here on the left, and then this is the 235 on the right. So this is the proposed street scene elevation. So you can see there is a difference in the height of approximately, that's going to 5.83, 5.84. Yeah, it's about 0.4 meters, which was the same on the plans. So you can see, if I just zoom out slightly, you can see that proposed elevation there.
So it's Councillor Bothwell and then Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. From the street elevations provided and the photographs of the street scene, I can't see any objection to this proposal based on looking at the ridge height. It's okay, it's slightly higher, but I don't think it's going to have a major impact on the street. I did have a question for officers. When I looked at the application online yesterday, I couldn't see this street elevation or the photographs. I wonder whether they are supplementary to the planning documents, or are they actually there and I missed them?
So the existing proposed street scene should be public, but the site photos are kept private, sensitive on the website.
Can you explain why that is?
Thank you. So the photographs that we've displayed as part of our presentation, they were taken by officers during the site visit. They were not submitted by the applicant as formal documents to be considered with the application. So so we've used those photographs for the purposes of planning committee to demonstrate what the street scene looks like, so for members
Thank
to
you.
assess.
So the
impact.
street elevation should be there.
Yes, they should be available on the website.
you.
Yes.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I just wanted the house on the left is the same ridge height as the proposed new ridge height, is what I'm seeing, and the one on the left, right, the one on the right is slightly lower, and I just wanted that to be absolutely clear, because I again can't see any objection to this. I mean, the parish council objections appear to be about excavations and things, which isn't. That's part of building control and stuff, isn't it? Okay, thank you.
Okay, can we move to the vote, please? A vote in favour is a vote to grant, subject to safeguarding conditions. Thank you, Lauren. If we could run the vote.
That's carried unanimously, Chair, with 8 votes.
Thank you very much, everybody. So let's now move on to application number CA 24 0. Oh, sorry. Thank you. Okay, everybody. So application number CA 24 01925, flat 5, Truscott House, 27 Queens Road, Whitstable. Could I ask the planning officer, Isabel Goodchild, to introduce the report, please? Oh, she's not here. I keep doing this, and I look over at you, and it's Elizabeth. I'm sorry. I apologise. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Do you mind bringing up the... Oh. Oh, brilliant. Thank you. So if we can go to the next slide. So this application is at Flat 5 Truscott House along Queens Road in Whitstable. The application site itself, as you can see, is on the corner of Queens Road with St Anne's Road, and it's an apartment block that occupies the site and is subject to this planning application. Next slide, please. So the application is a retrospective one, and it's seeking retrospective planning permission to regularise a single-storey detached outbuilding that's been built in the rear, to the rear of the apartment block, and you can see that outlined in the blue and annotated as the location of the sunroom. Next slide, please. So here are the elevations. As I said before, it's a detached single storey outbuilding. It's clad with stone and metal with a flat roof. Next slide, please. So here are some photos that were taken during the construction of the outbuilding, and this photograph is looking northeast towards the dwellings on St Anne's Road. Next slide, please. And for context as well, this is a photograph looking west, so this is looking towards the neighbouring property along Queens Road as well. So for the reasons set out in the report, the recommendation is to approve the application. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So let's invite our speakers now. The first person is Julie Keith. You could come up, you have 3 minutes.
Hello. Thank you. I live with my partner in the house at 45 St Anne's Road. Our neighbours at number 3 have also objected, but they are on holiday this week. The circulated site plan and photos... Excuse me. Yes, sorry. The circulated site plan and photos show the small courtyard to flat 5 now housing a disproportionately large and overbearing outbuilding with all the features of self-contained accommodation. You can see how it compares to the small bike store originally agreed by this committee. Intrinsic unfairness to neighbours is at play here, especially as we asked the applicant to pause for a friendly discussion. After waiting 3 months, we can't believe that approval is being recommended just because there is nothing in the local plan to support refusal, when in fact there are many material planning considerations indicating the application should be refused. For these reasons, we're asking the committee to refuse the application. This outbuilding really does need to come down as soon as possible. If for your own reasons you decide approval is the only option, then at the very least we ask for a condition requiring removal of the toilet and other plant and equipment, as these are not reasonably needed in a sunroom for incidental use, giving rise to noise, loss of amenity and scope for this outbuilding to be used for other purposes. We would also request legally binding conditions prohibiting its use as a business or for overnight accommodation. So why refuse? Members, precedent is material here. If you approve this unlawful development, there will be nothing to stop similar structures appearing in the courtyards of flats 1 and 2 and in the grounds of other flats. In planning terms, toilets are a feature of primary living accommodation and outbuildings can only be used for a purpose incidental to the applicant's main dwelling. This begs the question why a toilet and sink have been installed in this so-called sunroom, together with what appears to be a dangerously located heat pump. when the applicant already has 2 bathrooms in her main flat, and in terms of the overbearing size of the sunroom, she also has 2 balconies. In this context, and to guard against use of this outbuilding as overnight accommodation or as business premises, a recent planning appeal decision would support any judgment you make that there is no reasonable need for a sunroom of this size with a toilet, sink or heat pump. If this is approved, we are facing significant loss of residential amenity from the noise, intrusion and upset of a macerator toilet being used only 12 centimetres from our fence and so close to our patio where we sit quietly and eat our meals in the summer. And finally, the absence of an approved drainage plan for surface water and foul waste is another reason for removal of this structure, especially as it appears unauthorised connections have been made to the drains servicing our house and the 5 flats. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. And our second speaker, I believe you may be reading something from. So I just want to make it absolutely clear to the committee that Julie Keith is not having 6 minutes because that's, that would obviously not be within the normal rules of a planning presentation. So, but the second person is Sydney Russell, and he's not able to come today due to age, I think, or ill health. But so we have agreed that Julie can read his objection because he is another person in one of the flats. Thank you.
Thanks. So this is Mr. Russell's statement. My wife and I live in flat 1 at Truscott House. Without saying too much, my health is seriously failing and I am now housebound, so we really do need the decision on this application to be made sooner rather than later. My wife and I strongly object to construction of this so-called sunroom, and we are supported in that by Craig Allison, the owner of flats 2, 3 and 4. He can't be here tonight as he is overseas on business. The applicant shares ownership of the freehold of Truscott House with both of us as her 2 co-directors on the management company. She did not consult with us and as such does not have agreement from the current freeholder. We have the majority view. What happened here has been imposed on all the other residents of Truscott House, which is why there are no permitted development rights for flats. We're worried about any unauthorised connections made to our electricity supply and the shared foul water drains, which have serious implications for the building's insurance for the whole block, especially as we have already had foul waste running from the drains onto the corner of Queen's Road. The impact of all this on my wife and I has been distressing. We bought our flat for the final years of our retirement, largely because of the secluded garden. We had checked that nothing beyond a small bike store could go into flat 5's garden without planning permission, a protection we thought we could rely on. The outbuilding looms over where we sit in our garden and living room, which has glass patio doors. It looks and feels like a small bungalow, dark and overbearing. It is totally outsized in scale, given the size and close proximity of these 2 courtyards. We are very upset about the macerator toilet, sink and what appears to be a heat pump, all totally unnecessary for a sunroom. The unpleasant noise will disturb our peace and these facilities will enable the building to be used for overnight stays. We do not feel we can rely on assurances provided by the applicant about intended use, not least because we can't know if ownership of her flat could change in time. We ask the committee to refuse the application and require removal of the sunroom. At the very least, please require removal of the sink, toilet and any other features which mean the building could be used as overnight accommodation or as business. Thank you, members.
Thank you very much. The next speaker, could you come up, please? It's Jacobus van der Meer.
Right, hello everybody. I'm not as well prepared as she is. I'm the builder. I'm speaking on behalf of Lucy, and she just asked me if I can come because she's struggled with anxiety and not really. She's a bit upset to come. So all I want to address is just some of the things that's been brought up. So the macerator has been built in a soundproof box that you cannot hear. It's not a heat pump. It's actually an air conditioning unit that's outside just to supply cool air. To the size of the actual property, I think it's 28%. And it's 78 still left over, and then the actual the height and with the neighbors. It used to be all black, but when we spoke to them, as you guys would have seen in the picture, there's like, we've put astro and stuff in the front. We wanted to do a live garden, but because of the height restrictions, obviously under the permitted development that we thought was permitted, because there was a bike shed and it's under 15 square meters. That's also why Lucy immediately applied for, retrospective planning permission, or permitted planning permission. I'm trying to think what else is there. We've even the shape of where the room was. Lucy was considering the neighbors. So originally when I discussed it with her, we said we're going to put it at the back and she would look over the neighbor's house, but she said she doesn't want to have people look into her garden and she doesn't want to look into people's garden. So we turned it so that nobody looks into her garden and she doesn't look into anybody else's garden. Before we started there was just mud and no drainage, and there was a bike shed there already. So we've put the rainwater goes into the soakaway of the building, and the macerator that I say might cause noise. I mean, the building's been up for a while, and I believe Lucy has been using it, and I do believe that nobody would have heard any noises from it. She's also spent a significant amount of money on trees and just making the back garden nice for her. She lives on the upper floor in the apartment, so that's the reason for the toilet, is that she doesn't have to go into the flat and then go all the way up when she's just sitting outside. She's just moved from Blackheath, I believe. I did a job for her there, and she just wanted to come over here and just relax, and that's the only reason for it. She's a retired mom with a dog that just goes on walks, and yeah, that's it from my side.
Thank you very much. And our last speaker is Councillor Chris Cornell.
Good evening, friends. Happy Pancake Day. A once esteemed member of his committee once told me that there was no justice in planning. And whilst I understand that justice is subjective, I disagreed with him, because I feel it is our responsibility to try and prove to our residents that there can be. As a councillor, justice or fairness is at its most pertinent when we review retrospective applications. For not to consider a retrospective application with as much detail as one submitted properly makes a mockery of the system. At this point in a speech, my old colleague would normally quote some kind of historic reference. So Socrates would say that there are 4 things that belong to a judge: the ability to listen courteously, to answer wisely, consider soberly, and decide impartially. So impartially, I ask, would this application have been granted as part of the original design for the building? I believe the clear answer is no. Soberly, can I suggest that the report you have in front of you is an opinion, and as such should be viewed sceptically by you. The failure to do so could incur costs if we were taken to the inspectorate. Wisely, I would counsel that references to the building being within the size and dimensions allowed under permitted development are irrelevant here. Flats can't apply. That the report suggests that the building is proportionate to the apartment block is almost impossible for you to judge without including dimensions and a site visit. I would implore you to disagree with me that the character and appearance of the building would not be substantially changed were you to allow this application and set a precedent in which the 2 other flats could fill 2/3 of their allocated courtyards with outbuildings, significantly increasing the mass of the building when seen from the neighbours who look down from the block. The report before you recommends you grant with safeguarding conditions, but doesn't list them. It suggests environmental health should deal with the toilet when in a new application you would expect to see a noise survey and technical specifications for the heat pump or air conditioning unit. It suggests that foul surface water drainage is something only of consideration under building control when the new NPPF now mandates SUDS as an essential part of any application, and there is evidence from residents that the foul connection hasn't been mandated by the leaseholder. Many of the representations listed on 4 I would suggest are valid planning reasons to reject, but have little or no comment on them at all. Personally, I would implore you to reject this application. A legal precedent established by the Inspectorate in Freer versus Guildford Borough Council notes that a council must consider whether an outbuilding is genuinely incidental to the enjoyment of a dwelling house. And I would argue that a penthouse flat, which already has 2 large balconies, does not need a sunroom and certainly doesn't require a toilet when the resident can go upstairs. that the outside space in this application was important in maintaining the biodiversity of the site and not encroached on as it would change the form. If, having listened courteously, you are minded to agree, please add safeguarding conditions which ensure that it is not used for residential amenity and seeking the removal of a macerating toilet and air source heat pump. If the applicant wants to submit a further application with evidence, not conjecture, that these don't affect the residential amenity of the neighbour, you can consider them. But not adding a condition to remove sets a precedent that you're happy for people to effectively park toilets on the patios of their next door neighbours. Please show the neighbours here that justice can be served through the quality of your debate tonight, and don't simply nod this through, establishing a precedent for the loss of courtyard space across the district.
Thank you, speakers. This is difficult. There's various issues that we do need to discuss at great length. I think that the best thing for me to do is just to, first of all, find out what questions that you have got. I do think that there's considerable merit in considering what conditions we might want. However, some of these requests and some of these issues are ones that I'm afraid we can't condition. So in order to put this on the table, I will propose grants subject to safeguarding conditions. Do I have a seconder? No, well then we'll open it to discussion first. Thank you. Who would like to speak? So Paul Prentice first, Dan Smith, and then Dame Buckman.
Thank you, Chair. My first question, and I've got a number of questions, would be to ask what would the definition of an ancillary building be? And I know people have them for different purposes and different needs. And why in particular is this outbuilding needed, other than a sunroom? They're nice things to have, I suppose, but there are other spaces that can be used on this property. But in particular, why is an outbuilding with an air source heat pump and a macerating toilet needed? When I go to my own outbuilding, a garden shed, I'm collecting a lawnmower or some garden shears. I don't particularly need to go to the toilet or to use heating while I'm there. So I just wonder about the purpose of this particular building. I am not against the style of the building. I don't find it particularly offensive. I think the builder has done a good job of what's been put there. I've got no problem with that. And I'm certainly not against the use of heat pumps, as I'm sure many members of this committee and many members of this council are not against the use of heat pumps. I mean, that's a good thing. But I'm probably more minded to vote against this at the moment because I don't feel enough questions have been answered as to what the purpose of this is and sort of balanced to the needs of neighbours. And I think there is concern over the precedent that could be set if a number of other similar buildings were to be proposed in the area. It's quite a green, pleasant, spaced out area at the moment. And I would just be concerned as to any precedents that this would prompt. Thank you.
Let's see if there are other similar questions first, because we had four people wanting to speak. So Dan Smith, next. Thank you.
It's actually two. I'll forego questioning what Paul's already mentioned, but the water. There's no.
Can you speak clearly into the microphone? Because...
Sorry, there is no report on no comment on the report from the Statutory Water Authority about this. Now, there must have been water in to the toilet, and it's a macerating toilet, so in what way is water out? And we also have an allegation that there's an illegal connection to the water system, so some clarity around that would be helpful. And Also, the proximity to the neighbouring fence. I wonder if the officer can just clarify how close in a normal planning permission you would allow the proximity to the neighbouring fence, because 12 centimetres is very tight to the fence. Thank you.
Councillor Buckman.
Yeah, thank you. It was just to carry on sometimes about the aircon unit or the heat pump, whichever way round it is. So obviously, if it's a heat pump, it's got to be at least sort of about a metre away from the boundary. And then if it's an aircon unit, it depends on the size of the actual of the unit. If it was over, I think it's like 0.6 cube, that it would also have to be about a metre away from the boundary. That obviously it's not. And then there were, I know in the past, in one we've said about these outside units cannot be used for overnight stay. So whether or not we can get rid of a toilet or not, I thought we could actually say that that cannot be used to stay overnight. And then there was one further comment. I know the builder said about the stairs and the person having a toilet so they wouldn't have to go up and down the stairs. But obviously, if they've got to go down the stairs to get into the room anyway, it doesn't really, I don't see why that makes a difference. But yeah, so I'm inclined to go against this at this moment in time. Thank you.
And Councillor Naomi Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I'm looking at this and I know that Whitstable is awash with buildings like this in people's back gardens. Many of them that don't come up to planning because people don't object, or they're certainly not in such a cramped space as this. This is a cramped space. It's a relatively new build, the flats, and this does seem to be overbearing within the general size of the various. They're not really, I mean, the more yards and gardens that this block of flat has, you know, it isn't, I mean, we were told it's an air conditioned unit, not a heat source pump, it's an air conditioning unit. But the macerating toilet does worry me, because can we put a condition on removing the macerating toilet? Can we put a condition that no overnight stays are allowed? Because if you go on Airbnb, there are hundreds of these in Whitstable. And that would at least give some help to the objectors here. But I do feel it's a very big shed in a small space. And if everybody did this in the other properties, when I'm looking at this, I guess it's a drone shot, you know, it does set a precedent. But these larger houses equally can have that sort of size, and it's a difficult, it's not easy, this one. I can see the thing, but my main concern is it being used overnight, because then you have people sitting out, drinking wine, having a laugh, having a giggle. Every weekend, it's a different party that comes. If anybody's ever lived next door to an Airbnb, they know how that works. So I would wonder if we can just make sure that the condition about no overnight stays and that nobody can sleep in it. Okay, thank you.
I think what's important here, because I've had chance to ask the officers in my preliminary meeting for this. So I actually think it's really important that what we hear from Stevie is what we can and what we can't condition. We do need to put condition, but I'm afraid not all the things that people want we can do. So, and I think what your point was about being lots and lots of these buildings was covered in paragraph 6, that if it was in the grounds of an ordinary dwelling, it wouldn't require it. So the neighbours could put them in there, but it's because it's an apartment. Not the size, just the apartment. So, Stevie, can I? Yeah. So let's have because I thought the question. Oh, Councillor Bothwell, do you want to add a question? Because it would be good just to, because it's complicated. Because very clear points have been made, but I know that some of them are without our jurisdiction. We just can't do some of the things that we might want to do or think we could do. Councillor Bothwell.
Yes, it's not really a question. It's a comment on the application. I don't share my fellow councillors' views on this. I don't see any major objection to this proposal, if you call it a proposal, at this stage, having been built. I'm not very. The building is fairly elegant, but I'm not sure about the materials going with the existing building. But I think it's the kind of thing that is being put up generally. I think there may be technical issues with drainage. Is it going into the foul sewer, for example? There may be technical issues with the air conditioning unit, proximity to the boundary, fire risk, etc. But those are, I'm not sure if they're planning considerations or not. But overall, I don't see the building as being overbearing. And it appears to only occupy less than 50%, maybe 40% of the courtyard area. So I don't see any major objection to it. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll ask Stevie to comment on all of those points that people have made. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So just listening to the debate, I think the two key concerns that the members have are around what control we may have over what facilities go in the outbuilding, and another concern is about potential uses of the building as well. I think that's kind of a fair summary of what the key concerns are by members. So in terms of the facilities, I think obviously the discussion has been mainly around, toilet facilities within the outbuilding. Now, under planning, we have no control over what facilities are installed into the outbuilding. It's not development that requires planning permission, and those facilities could be installed retrospectively, after the outbuilding has been built, and we would have no control over that. But what we do have control over is the use, and that goes into the second main concern that the councillors have as well, and particularly around, separate uses, potential kind of holiday let uses, for example, that are separate from the flats. So we can, if members are minded to approve the application, we can attach a safeguarding condition requiring the outbuilding to remain ancillary to the flat. And if there is any material change of use, if it is used separately from the flat, then that would be a material change of use that requires planning permission. So we can attach that condition if members feel that that would be an appropriate safeguarding condition to attach. Other points that I picked up on, one point was around this setting a precedent. As the Chair said, there are dwellings within the vicinity of the site that would have permitted development rights to build outbuildings within their gardens, and if and any further development, any further outbuildings within the grounds of this apartment building, that would require planning permission, because apartment buildings do not benefit from permitted development rights for outbuildings like dwellings do. So each case would be assessed on its own merits. So I think there isn't a concern around precedent. Another issue that was raised was potential illegal connection to the foul sewer. Now that would need to be accepted by the statutory undertaker. That's something that's outside of the planning process, so that's not something that we can take into account when making a decision on this application. That's subject to separate legislation. Another concern that was raised, I believe it was from Councillor Smith, was around required distances from fences. And there's no policy requirement for outbuildings to be a certain distance from neighbouring fences. What a planning consideration is the impact on the living conditions of neighbouring property occupiers. That's what we can take into account. There's no set requirement for an outbuilding to be a certain distance, and that's also the case with permitted development rights. It's not restricted in terms of distance from boundaries. It's restricted in terms of height in relation to boundaries. So I just wanted to pick up on that point as well.
The fan, the aircon stroke heat.
Yes, I was just about to come to that bit. Sorry, I'm just going through my notes. So yeah, there was been some concerns around what may be a heat pump or an air con unit. The application is for the outbuilding. That's what we're considering at this time. And I just checked the legislation, and permitted development rights do exist for heat pumps to apartment buildings. It's different to outbuildings where they don't have permitted development, apartment buildings don't have permitted development rights for outbuildings, but they do have permitted development rights for heat pumps as well. And an aircon unit, that won't require planning permission either. So just to clarify that point, I think that may be it. If I've missed anything, please
No, I
let
don't
me
think so.
let me know. Thank you.
So a number of people want to come back. Councillor Naomi Smith first.
Thank you, Chair. You said, when we talked about that it could only be used for ancillary to the property, which is the flat. So could the flat have a lodger in that? I mean, what? Because you could. Okay, people don't want it to be an Airbnb, but they also don't want anybody living there in it. So it's how? Because I know of people in Whitstable who live in their garden, so-called shed, which is a deluxe, you know, kitchenette and bathroom unit, which nobody pays council tax for either. But so could we condition that nobody can live in it?
So yes, if it was being used by people that are completely unrelated to the occupier of the flat, then that would be a separate planning unit that would require planning permission.
Right. So their child or their sister or brother could live in it, and that's fine. This is, I'm just trying to say, so it can become lived-in accommodation in circumstances.
I suppose that would be dictated by the size of the outbuilding, whether or not it could be used as a residential unit. But if it is used ancillary to the flat, if it's used by the occupiers of the flat or family members, for example, then yes, that would fall within the definition of ancillary use. But as I said, we have to consider the kind of the size of the outbuilding as well and what uses could potentially take place in that building. But as I said, we can put that safeguarding condition on to make it absolutely clear that it can only be used ancillary, and if it is used as a separate unit, unrelated, then that would be a change of use that requires planning permission.
Thank you. It's Dan Smith next. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted a bit of clarification from Stevie. You mentioned that the flat has permitted development for a heat pump, but you didn't. The heat pump is obviously on the ancillary building in this case. They're not. That's not the flat. It's a separate building to the flat. So perhaps some clarity on what the legislation says there.
Yes, apologies, I will clarify. So it's so there are permitted development rights for heat pumps on apartment buildings and within the grounds of apartment buildings. So it can either be attached or it can be freestanding. There are permitted development rights that exist for both. But as I've said before, what we are considering in front of us is the planning application, and that is for an outbuilding. So that's what we're considering. Thank you.
It's Councillor Mellish next.
Thank you, Chair. It still didn't really answer the question, Stevie, because the heat pump is for the use of the ancillary building, not for the use of the apartment. It's kind of like repeating what Councillor Smith has said about it in some ways, but it's not directly related to the apartment. The way you describe it, it may be either attached to the apartment or standing free from, but the use of the heat pump is to the apartment, not to any other building. Well, even if it's an air conditioner, then it's still attached to the outbuilding and not providing air conditioning for the apartments. So which way does it lie? And there's a supplementary as well, if you don't mind, Chair, in terms of we may not be able to make any sort of judgment on the facilities, etc., on the provision of toilets and so on. But is there a way in which we can reference those, ask the relevant environment department or whatever to be actually involved in that building.
So, sorry, in terms of the permitted development right position, I don't think I've made myself particularly clear. I was just alluding to the fact that their permitted development rights exist for heat pumps within the grounds of or on an apartment building. I wasn't necessarily passing comment on this particular instance. As I said, we're considering the application that is in front of us, and that's for the outbuilding, but we can certainly look into the heat pump, the air conditioning unit separately. Sorry, I missed the second part of your question. It was that in terms of other people's involvement.
Yeah, I take the chair's judgment in terms of the facilities, the toilets, etc. The provision of those is not part of the remit of this committee. But is there a way in which we can reference that over to the relevant Department of Environment or wherever it might be to ensure that it's complying with relevant legislation? It is being probably connected to foul water disbursement, etc.
Well, what we can do is, I'm not an expert on building regulations, but we can see if building regulations sign off or approval would be needed for those facilities. So that's something we can pick up separately. Yeah, of course. Thank you.
So just from my point of view, I wanted to just check. If we did that, it would be after we'd granted permission. It's not something we can actually take into consideration when considering whether or not to grant, just to be clear. But we can do it to make sure that it's been checked. The next person I've got is Councillor Prentice.
I think the comment really just followed on from what Councillor Naomi Smith was saying about living arrangements for other properties in Whitstable where there are outbuildings being used for living accommodation, and there doesn't seem to be any sort of really firm safeguard against that being the case here, and all of the issues that might cause further down the line into the future. So while we can't dictate what sorts of facilities are used in this outbuilding, it just strikes me as being a little bit of a concern that we don't have an awful lot of control over how this building might be purposed.
But that's true of anybody's ancillary buildings, isn't it? Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. Again, this is quite a frustrating application. Retrospective applications are never a good thing because you've got no control over what's been built. It's built. And if we grant permission, we're not going to go, it's the wrong size, it's the wrong height, we've got what we've got in front of us. So it's very difficult for us to sort of assess whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. It's not a planning reason, but if they own the lease of the flats, then they're all leaseholders, stuff like that. But if this went through planning correctly, with the first application come through, say for instance we were to grant it, then the sewage connection would be looked at, the water supply would be looked at. What we've got here is what we've already got, and if we actually grant this and allow this to happen, it's almost going, okay, build what you like and ask for retrospective planning permission. And I've come across this so many times in planning, and it's so frustrating, and every time the developer just gets away with it or the householder gets away with it. There does need to be some sort of presence. There does need to be more building control looked at this. We should have been round here looking at this before it even got out of the ground, if we was aware of this. So because of those kind of reasons, I really can't support this because it's not the correct way of doing buildings. It should go through planning, and whether or not we would have granted it or not, we're in a position where, because it's built now, we've almost got kind of a gun to our head to grant this because it's built. It's not too bad. It's got a green roof and it's not too overbearing. I actually do think it's quite overbearing in the property, and I'm looking at it from their view, and actually the other flats may do, and the neighbouring property, yeah, it's probably not overbearing to the neighbouring property, but it might be frustrating to them. And had they got permission or applied for permission, this would have all come out. It's just so annoying. Thank you, Chair.
I do understand why people have got a lot of concerns. I think the real difficulty is the limitations on the conditions that we can put on this. However, I think if you collectively are not happy, because remember that we have to find reasons to reject. We can't just say we don't agree with grant. We have to make the alternative case. And at the moment, we haven't got those reasons because, as Stevie Andrews has explained, a lot of the points that people have raised are not really ones we can take into account. You might think we should be able to, but we can't. So I wondered whether, I'm not suggesting it from the chair because I feel that we could go ahead and make a decision, but I don't think members feel we can. So I wondered whether anybody wanted to propose a site visit on this one, or give us a chance to have a good think about it.
Yes, I would like to propose a site visit on this one.
So Councillor Naomi Smith has proposed a site visit. Is anybody wanting to second that? Oh, loads of people. Okay, I think I saw Dan's hand first. So Councillor Smith and Councillor Smith.
And we're not married.
No.
Ever.
I think this, I think I did actually. So we need to take a vote. So in order to go and do a site visit, we need to take a vote. I don't recall us.
That's carried, Chair, with 7 votes for and 2 abstained.
Thank you very much. So that's where we are with that one, and obviously we will get that arranged as soon as possible. I don't think we've got quite the problem we had last time we went to do a site visit because it's a bit lighter in the evenings. But I do recall that a lot of people here are working and prefer later in the afternoon if possible. So we'll try and aim for that. So now we need to move on to the last application. Yes. Yes, anybody who wants to leave at this point can. Right. Thought that might happen. Oh. It's a backyard. Yes, so we go on to application number CA 25 00048, Woodlands, Boyden Gate Hill, Chislet. And could I ask the planning officer, Elizabeth Arachie, to introduce the report? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. This application is for Woodlands, a property located along Boydengate Hill in Chislett. The house dwelling is a semi-detached property and the application proposes the insertion of 2 roof lights to the side elevation. The application has been called to committee as the applicant is an employee of the council. The proposed roof lights are shown on the elevational drawings. There are also roof lights proposed to the front and the rear of the property. However, these are considered to be permitted development and do not require planning permission. Here are a couple of photos to contextualise the site and to illustrate the minor scale of the proposal. For the reasons set out in the report, we shall be recommending this application for approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We don't have any speakers for this item. I will propose that we follow the officer's recommendation and grant subject to safeguarding conditions. And do I have a seconder? Thanks, Naomi Smith. Thank you. Any comments? Dan Smith.
Just the one really, that obviously with lights and in a rural area like this, there is an effect on insects and bats and so on. So if there is some kind of shuttering to point the lights downwards within the scope of what the applicant wants. Thank you.
Elizabeth or Stevie, do you want to comment? No? No? Any other comments? Then I suggest, Councillor Jones.
Move to grant, I was going to.
Yes, I was going to say, let's move to grant. So a vote for is a vote to grant this application. We'll take the vote now, Lauren, thank you.
I didn't get an answer to my point. Is that possible to be included as a condition?
Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. So this is an existing property. There are existing windows. So 2 of the roof lights are permitted development. The other 2 roof lights would be permitted development if they're obscure glazed or non-opening. So yeah, I have nothing more to add than that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have we taken the vote? I'm not sure now. Lauren? We've got to start again. I had voted, but do it again.
That's carried with 8 votes, Chair, and 1 abstained.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody. Now we move on to Planning Appeals Report. Stevie, do you have any comments? Does anybody have any questions on the Planning Appeals Report? No. So can we note the Planning Appeals Report by general assent, please? Thank you. We don't have any urgent business to be dealt with in public. And we don't have any other business which fall under exempt provisions. Date of the next meeting is 19th of March, the special meeting, and we close the meeting at about 8 minutes past 8. Thank you very much.